Okay, welcome back to the next part of the video. In the last video, we went through all the steps to make sure that our XR2 was configured so that we could make it throughout this whole mission. Just a brief recap, we cut our crew back from 14 down to 6, and that allowed us to carry a half LOX tank of, I should say a half tank of LOX in the payload compartment as opposed to a whole LOX tank. Plus, if you recall, one whole LOX tank wasn't even enough if we had the 14 crew. So we cut back to 6 crew. That gives us 490 days of oxygen with just a half container. And right before we go, we'll probably dump about 40 days, maybe even 50 days of LOX, because we only needed 425 days. And we put in an extra container of main fuel. Made sure that we dumped all the scram because we're doing the vertical launch on the Falcon Heavy, so we don't need any scram fuel. And we're carrying the crew habitat module just to make sure that our crew is comfortable throughout their journey. Let's bring up the large MFDs. And we have just a little bit of work left to do in TransX in stage 1. We need to come around to the graph projection, and it generally works best if you set it to plan while doing this setup here on the ground. And then we'll come around to view escape. View escape plan, go to the PE distance, and we usually like to set that to 200 kilometers, which will be 6.571. About right there. And finally, want to make an adjustment to the eject orientation. We're actually really close to where we need to be at the moment, but we're not quite ready to take off just yet. And as luck would have it, we're getting a heading of almost 90 degrees, which is exactly what we want. And the heading seems to depend on your launch date as well as your latitude. So, you know, if we were going to Venus on a different date, we might not be able to get a launch heading of 90 degrees here at KSC. But if we were wide awake, we might be able to get a better launch heading. But again, as luck would have it, we're almost at 90 degrees. And let's check our date. In stage 2, so we'll go to view eject plan, and we're saying we want to take off, or rather we want to eject at 7470. So I'm thinking I would really like to go now because we've got that nearly 90 degree heading, but it just isn't going to take us that long to get up into orbit, obviously. But I don't know if we have time necessarily to go around a whole day, because I think we'd have to go a whole day to get back to a near 90 degree heading. Well, I guess what we can do, I mean, if we go forward too much, we can always exit out of the simulator and just come back in. I'd like to see if we can go forward in time and get closer to this 7470 and still have a good launch heading. So that's the first thing I'm going to do here. Just a little bit of 100x. I'm just kind of keeping an eye back off a little bit. Let's see what our eject orientation is now. Let's go forward a little farther. Okay, let's back off and check our eject orientation now. I'm honestly not sure if it's better to take off with a bad heading, you know, quote unquote bad, and then, but we would be closer to the right time for the ejection, or if we should just, I think what we should probably do is exit out, and we'll just use that 90-degree heading that we had right there at the start. I think that's probably the best thing to do. Because if I keep going forward in time and get really close to that 7, whatever that figure was exactly, 7470, by the time I get to that point, I know my launch heading is going to be basically, you know, 90 degrees opposite of what it needs to be. It's going to be like a right angle. It's going to be terrible. So let's bring up TransX. Perhaps I should have saved that. Oh well. This just takes a second. Grab projection to plan. And escape plan, we want 6571. And then again, eject orientation. We're almost right where we need to be. Okay, now the last thing we'll do before we launch is we'll dump some of that LOX.
Warning, LOX dump. Warning, LOX dump.
Okay, let me think here. We wanted 425, or we need 425 days. So let's carry 450 days worth.
Warning, LOX dump.
About right there. That gives us a little bit of a margin for error. Okay. Now we'll turn the APU on to close the radiator.
APU offline.
And then we're going to launch. And when we launch, we're actually going to have to switch over to the Falcon Heavy for the actual launch. Okay, radiator's closed. Just double check everything here. Okay, let's switch vehicles. Yeah, kind of forgot about that. One thing I'll have to do, obviously, we need our TransX plan. So I'm going to have to quick save and then copy and then make a small change to the scenario, because since we are switching vehicles, we need our TransX plan obviously in the Raven Star, because once we're in orbit, the Raven Star is going to be the vehicle that carries out the mission. But during the launch, I need to have the TransX plan so that I can, you know, follow the ascent and everything. So let me Control S to save. I'm gonna have to exit out real quick for a moment. And we'll copy that, actually cut that scenario because we don't need an extra copy of it in the quick save, and then we'll paste it over here. And we'll call it 04 ready to launch. And then what I need to do is edit that scenario And I need to tell TransX, and there may actually be a way to do this inside of Orbiter, but I'm not sure. Here, we just need ship. Ship FH, that tells TransX to use the Falcon Heavy instead of the Raven Star, and then once we get into orbit, we'll have to do this again. We'll have to do it the other way. There's a way to inherit plans, but I've never been able to make it work. So that should be all we need to do there. So save that. Minimize that, exit out of Orbiter because we made a file change. Ready to launch. Let's try this again.
All systems
Okay, now we select the Falcon Heavy, and there we have our plan. Okay, VW over to escape plan, and we need a heading of 92.14. Let me bring up orbit over here, projection ship, distance, and frame, and let me bring up an external MFD. Surface, just put it here in the middle. Okay, now we should be ready to go. Let's take one quick look outside. Set that aside for a moment. G to remove the service tower. You can see it, the arms there. And then this will back away. There it goes. Just thinking here for a moment. All right, I think we're ready to go. One thing I know that we're going to need to do, we don't want to pitch over too quickly because we do have to make sure that we're up above 65 or 70 kilometers before we get too much velocity, because the Raven Star will, you know, even though we're not inside of it, it will still have a hull breach if we are too low. I think we're ready to go. Full power on the main engines.
Translation rotation.
And we're already facing the direction that we need to be facing. Let's roll over. Actually, I think the Dragon launches, I don't think it has to be upside down. I should say the Falcon. Get our heading. It was about 92 degrees. Okay, we'll start pitching over. Slowly, not too quickly. Watching the relative inclination here, and then as necessary, we'll make adjustments. Let me bring up the eject orientation. Probably pitching over a little too fast. Let me move that over here, off to the side. Slow down my pitch a little bit. And I'm going to see about getting a little bit more on the relative inclination. Take a quick look outside. It's really hard to fly from the external camera. I know it looks cooler, And I really wish there was a way that I could bring this view up in an external MFD, but I can't, so I can only take momentary glimpses outside. Okay, we're 51 kilometers, pitching over. Let's do a bit of an adjustment here to make sure that our relative inclination is good. Relative inclination's coming down nicely. Everything's looking pretty good. Apoapsis is climbing slowly. Time to apoapsis is 118, going down a little bit. Vertical speed's currently 1,000 meters a second. Relative inclination coming down. Let's look outside. The boosters have already fallen away. I missed it. Do a bit of an adjustment here. Go down to a super setting now. Relative inclination still coming down. Apoapsis getting close to 200. We may go above it actually. Climbing at 980 meters a second. Relative inclination is looking pretty good. I'm actually going to start putting in a little bit of bank this way. I want to kind of slow down the relative inclination a little bit, I think. Oop, I went too far. Alright, there we go. Do a tiny bit of an adjustment. Go down to Ultra. Actually, Super is working better. We've got it right on the line. Maybe a little ahead. See the relative inclination coming down. Apoapsis is over 200. That's going to be okay, I believe. Vertical speed is 740 meters a second. We can go ahead and pitch down a little more, I believe. Relative inclination looking good. And we'll kind of hold the vessel right here. We're at 180 kilometers altitude. Falcon engine performing beautifully. And we're coming up on the end of that stage here very soon. Relative inclination looking really good, but we do need to maybe pitch, or rather yaw a little bit, because we're going to be, that's a bit much. Very sensitive. Right about there looks good. Apoapsis is a bit over 200. Time to apoapsis 65 seconds. Vertical speed 350 and coming down pretty quickly, so we probably should pitch up just a little bit. We're almost at the end of the first stage. Coming up on first stage Miko, or whatever it's called. And there it is. That stage, I believe, separates automatically. Yes, it does. We're going to coast for just a little bit. Give that stage time to separate. While that's separating, we'll do a bit of an adjustment here so that our relative inclination is more accurate to where we are at the moment. Apoapsis 218. Almost 219, time to apoapsis 41 seconds, and vertical speeds 150 meters per second and falling. We should have enough distance now. We'll put in one touch of main engine and we exploded. So we got to do the whole thing over. And I hate when that happens. That was a really good launch. I think I even know why it exploded. I forgot to before you can start the second stage, you absolutely have to make sure that your vessel is totally stable, which I always do by hitting kill rotate, and I just forgot to do it this time. Like as soon as I started to power it up, it dawned on me I didn't hit kill rotate. So I'm pretty sure that's why that failed. But we're dead, or I shouldn't say dead. In fact, maybe just for the fun of it, I should try to save the crew. So what we can do here is shift in. I believe it's shift in, or it's shift P. Yeah, shift P to separate the payload. Then we can select the XR2, and now we're in recovery mode.
Rotation.
Traveling at 5,300 meters a second. Let's see. What base options we have available to us. Let's bring up map MFD. We could probably make it to Wide Awake. I don't know if I really want to bother taking all that time. I guess we could also turn around because we are at 54. I think we could probably turn around. Let's just give it a shot. Usually when I have a failure like that, I just quit and start over, but just for the sake of trying to save the crew, let's see what we can do here. So we're at 180 kilometers. Let's get ready for atmospheric flight. I don't know if this is going to work. We're coming down at 700 meters a second. Hitting the atmosphere is going to be like, again, hitting concrete. I could obviously use the main engines. Trying to find our direction of flight. There it is.
Mach 20.
I don't see how this could possibly be a survivable situation without using a lot of main engine fuel to keep ourselves from not hitting the atmosphere so hard. And quite frankly, I don't want to do that, so if we burn up, we burn up. I don't really care. I just want to start over.
20.
I'm really annoyed by that failure.
Mach 19. Mach 18.
Yeah, there's no way. We're dead.
Mach 17. Warning, hull temperature.
I don't even care. Alright, that's gonna be... it's gonna be the end of that video. To debating if I even want to post it. I guess I will, but we're going to start over. So I will see you in the next part, which I'm going to start recording right now.